We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Taste with you well, if you've gone sour. You want the world plus everything, but you won't work an hour. And now your questions are guilt creeping, and you go and buy her flowers. You throw away the dreams we had, boy. I won't allow it. I said we're gonna fall out. Let's see you get out. I think we're gonna fall out. Just shut your mouth.
Good evening. Welcome to a pre-recorded version of the Professionals, recorded before the Burnley game. So we won't be talking about the Burnley game tonight, but we didn't want to let you down this weekend. So we put out a call for questions on X a little bit earlier in the week, and we got some belters. And so it's a big welcome to Stu and to Mitch. Hi, lads.
Hi, lads.
All good, all good. Don't forget there is going to be a couple of more pre-recorded shows this week, as I'm not able to do live this week, but there is plenty for you to get your teeth into. Fans Forums being pre-recorded. That'll be there Monday. Tuesday, Sid's Dream Team. Wednesday, those were the days. And then Thursday, I'll be back live with Super Mac and Gibbo. And of course, the Amigos will be back live on Friday. So looking forward to getting back to doing live shows on my return. But before we get into the questions that were sent on Twitter, Stu, you had some notes because it's been quite a big week, hasn't it? Really, with all the announcements and rumours flying round and anchoring being talked about. We all thought that was something to do with boats, but it seems it's something to do with the Premier League now, and obviously stadium plans, and all of that. Lots come out, and probably lots has come out before we pre-recorded this, and lots to come out afterwards. But you've done another one of your scrolls, I think we'll call it, Stu scrolls.
I thought you wanted us to talk about yesterday's 3-1 win at Burnley, but
no, you're not the first person to do that, because on the Fans Forum somebody's predicted a score, so it'll be interesting to see whether anybody gets it. But yeah, I'll go with 3-1, mate.
Yeah, me too. No, it's yesterday, which obviously this is 5 days pre-recorded, so as you said, a lot can change in the time. Mitch put a tweet out asking for questions, and I did something similar today, and I was expecting a lot of daft questions, because we like to have a bit of crack on here, but there was a lot regarding the new Premier League rules that was voted through, that some thought wouldn't get voted through, that have been voted through, anchoring, and they'll be reaffirmed at the AGM in June. So I started looking into it, and I thought, right, I'll start answering the questions, because if you start reading all the questions out, Steve, a lot of them will roll into the same ones. And so I thought, right, I'll do my bit on it. So if I understand it, then I think everyone else should be able to understand it. So this is the stupid Stuart's version. What I wrote was anchoring at the moment. And I might be looking like a newsreader because I've got it written there. Anchoring at the moment, more questions than answers. Hopefully, all will be given in June at the Premier League's AGM. From a Newcastle United perspective, initially, due to our revenue and salaries are low in comparison to the favoured six, we gain more from it. It gives us more scope to invest before we reach the ceiling that others will find themselves at due to huge squads and eye-watering salaries. Then I thought worries, questions, concerns, fears. It appears solely linked to the TV revenue of the bottom team then by a factor of 4.5. I think that's what was announced. So, questions. What if the TV companies decide to collude to pay less next time round? Effectively, the spending capabilities of everyone reduces. Secondly, the commercial revenue, as in the sponsorships, will be in a stronger position to offer less, as there is less certainty of clubs consistently qualifying for Europe or winning trophies. So therefore, I can see performance-related sponsorships being introduced. Thirdly, will clubs now believe they have the opportunity to compete? So to get the extra revenue to allow them to reach this limit, will matchday ticket prices be at levels we've seen elsewhere, but never before, not just in Newcastle, but in the Premier League? In an attempt to generate additional income to allow them to at least have a go. That was in inverted commas. This directly affects the match-going supporter. Fourthly, I wrote, similarly, will shirt makers be encouraged by the clubs to raise price of strips for more kickback and other club-related merchandise to help the generation of cash to get towards an even keel? Fifthly, ultimately, at least half the clubs won't be close to being able to spend and sustain the allowable figure without borrowing huge sums, which puts them at risk of going bust. See Everton, which was announced today. Take the favoured six, plus Newcastle, plus Villa, plus West Ham, who are all capable of generating enough money through sponsorships, through the turnstiles, through TV revenue, etc., who they can generate enough money to create it, to reach that cap. It could genuinely create a two-tier Premier League. So that's the worries and concerns. But then a lot of questions were, how could it benefit Newcastle and hamper the rest? So with continued commercial growth on the trajectory that we're on, we have plenty of revenue streams we've mentioned several times before, which remain untapped at the moment. We could add these. The top six are either maxed out or very close to the limit of how they can generate additional funds. So initially, we could spend more, while some at the top won't be able to, which is good news for us. Very bad news for Man United, Chelsea, Man City, and possibly Arsenal. Then I wrote very smallly, transfer fees. We don't need to sell, but can collect bargains from other teams that do. And then I put in brackets Branthwaite, Everton. We could get him on a deal for a lower price than what they would like to sell him for, same as we got Anthony Gordon. And then for me, the only one or two clubs in the Premier League could afford to buy Isak or Bruno. They won't be able to now. So that's reassuring for us, and it puts us in a stronger position. The third thing on the positives for us was salaries. Now, this is huge, and I know when this first came out yesterday, I was on the phone to Mitch, and I says, you know what it is? I says, you look at our salaries and you look at Man United's, this is why they're voting against it, why Man City voted against it, and why Chelsea abstained. I believe Chelsea think it's a great idea, but they've abstained because of the huge amount of money they've got going out on a monthly basis. So I'll ask you these questions, Steve. They're very simple ones, or they should be. For £450,000 a week, you can have Bruno, Joe Linton and Tonali, or you can have Casemiro and Van der Beek, who doesn't even get in the squad. Where's your 450,000 going? Right.
Yeah.
So that's one level. The next comparison is for £125,000 or £250,000 a week, we can pay Isak on his current salary and Trippier. Or you can have Anthony Marshall for the same money. Next segment was Botman and Gordon. Even if we give them new contracts up to £100,000 a week, which they're both not on, but for us to secure them long term, it wouldn't be the daftest idea to give them an incentivized or a renewed contract. Let's say we give them £100,000 a week. That's another £200,000 a week. Or you can have Anthony from Man United. So that's seven of our top players versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of theirs, and only 3 of them actually get anywhere near the first team, which is that Anthony, sadly, Casemiro, and in fact, no, That's it. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then that doesn't take into consideration that they're paying Luke Shaw 150 grand a week, Ericsson 150 grand a week, Martinez 120 grand a week, Onana 120, Lindelof 120, Sancho 195, Maguire 190. They're playing Varane, Rashford, Martial, in fact, 10 of them. Casemiro, Varane, Rashford, Martial, Mason Mount, Fernandes, Anthony, and Sancho and Maguire are all on combined in an annual salary is £120 million per year. That's a quarter of what they'll be able to allow to spend and generate when the new rules come in, and that's on those players. The total squad that they spend on the total squad is 200 million, which I worked out was 42% already going out in wages to these players, and a lot of them on long-term contracts. So now you see why Sir Jim Ratcliffe and his minions voted against it. Newcastle, in comparison, currently are spending £85 million a year on salaries. So they're spending, what, 2.5 times more than us on salaries. And look what they're buying with it. Look what they're getting for it. So with proper management, which we do have, and a plan, we should prosper. It now substantiates what we've all known. This is point 4. It now substantiates what we've all known for a long time. The TV companies rule football and have no real consideration to the fans, but they have now all the power. And it's scary that this is linked to TV money. Nothing else, just TV money. And if you look at when I say all the power, who decides when we have to play Brighton on a Monday night, or Bournemouth away on a Saturday evening, Brighton again on a Saturday evening, or the London teams in the evening kickoffs so the fans can't get back? It's all done to appease football, and they really couldn't give a toss as long as they know that we will go there and fill the away ends and the home fans will fill the home ends. But that's the worries and concerns and the positives in Newcastle's favour. So to summarise, I genuinely believe we can take advantage of the new anchoring rule. It will be interesting to discover what the overspending penalties will be and what is deemed deductible as what they have now. You know, you can have deductions for, I don't know, for investing in the women's team, etc. But probably it's the best or the most fairest way it could have been done to appease the majority, considering they're now trying to act after me. They're closing the door after the stable door after the horse has bolted. So this is what it's done, and they're now realising that the Premier League is apparently 20 equal members and not 2 plus their cohorts. And it won't be long before you have people screaming, "Oh, we're going to go and join the Super League." Then it opens a bigger case. If the Premier League teams are allowed to spend this, does that take them over the UEFA rules? No, not if it's done properly. And secondly, you get then, it's okay it's saying that Europe won't allow them, but without the English teams, and I'll say English teams because the Scottish teams don't fare that well, but without the English teams in Europe, would it really be a real European championship, a European Cup, Champions League, Europa League, whatever? It's all, what they've done in Europe is trying to help out the Juventuses, the Real Madrids and Barcelonas. And if the TV companies have got the power, if there's no Man United playing in Europe, there's no Man City or no Arsenal playing in Europe, where they get the monies from the advertising will drop their money very quickly. So this could be the first start to actually overhauling football for the better. Not as good as it should be, but as I said earlier, I think it's went too far. But getting it back to some form of redress where at least it gives teams the opportunity to grow. And if we grow to the stage where we're at, spending-wise, Man City's or Liverpool's or even Tottenham's, then it should be the best manager and the best team and the best attitude wins. And that's what football's always been about. So that's what I wrote down. And I thought I'd get that out of the way because that's probably answered a lot of questions you've been asked us on this, Steve. So that's me done. Time for a drink, and now for Mitch.
Go on, then, Mitch. What do you made of what Stu's had to put down there? Thanks for doing that, Stu. It makes a lot more sense when you break it down like that, and I'm sure our viewers will respect that and be
very eloquently put and put in a way that so many more people will be able to grasp what's going on with anchoring. And there are clearly advantages for us to be had through an anchoring type system. That's why we voted for it. Turkeys don't vote for Christmas. And so if we were keen on it, there's a reason for it. If Man United, Man City and Chelsea weren't so keen on it, there's a reason for them being so. Same with Villa. Although I think Villa are looking at a much shorter term. They're seeing their wings being clipped for Europe.
Yeah.
So in some ways I can get that. For me, my reaction over the last couple of days has probably been a little bit more subdued, because I always want to see what the reality of it is. What's the meat on the bone with this? It sounds great. It sounds like we can profit from it. But what else is in there? And the first one is the 70-80% PSR type situation with UEFA. It sounds like it's going to be run alongside, which gives us a hell of a lot less wiggle room. We still have some, but a lot less if we then also have to comply to things like that. Although there's things within that might not carry forward. And again, I think there's a long time between now and June for these things to be worked out. So I think there's a bit of watch this space on that before people jump to conclusions one way or the other. And I think the other glaring thing that people are talking about at the moment are associated company sponsorships, because there's two very big holes in that at the moment, and both are sat at Chelsea. They created a company owned wholly by a blue core company for their front of shirt sponsorship, who sponsor Chelsea for 20 times what their revenue is a year, which just sounds very fishy to me. And then obviously there's the hotel sales, which nobody seems to know whether that's been ratified through their accounts or not. Because if that is ratified, that's absolutely an associated company deal, and therefore goes absolutely against what they wanted to stop with the Newcastle amendments, and therefore opens a whole new set of income streams for us going forward, potentially. So I think once things like that are ironed out and we see have more clarity on that, that's when I might start getting excited about what we've got the expansion. Stu's quite right about Man U. They're crippled with wages and long contracts. So are Chelsea. Absolutely. And the way Man United are behaving with regards to the Ashworth situation, the way they've come out in the last couple of days and said basically most of our squad is for sale. Yeah, because you've got people who are sat there on big contracts. And what's the example I've been using all along in the last few weeks when we talk about this? How long were we stuck with Henry Saviot? And they've got multiple Saviots on their books.
Maguire, Mitch, didn't it? He wouldn't move because the wages he's on, 190 grand a week. West Ham weren't going to pay that, so he wanted Man United to pay the difference. So Absolutely. Then it becomes, what's the point in having a transfer?
Yes, and so therefore the club might as well sit on him and keep him at least as book value when it is an asset. And so I can see why some of the clubs were not in favour, because they know that they're in trouble. We do, on the raw face of it, you're absolutely right. We've got a hell of a lot more wiggle room. It depends then on top of that how this UEFA style management sits alongside this, or if that gets totally chucked out with the bathwater. Because you're also right, UEFA have got to be very careful what they're doing, while Real Madrid and Barcelona are still banging Super League drums. Because if they make a mess of Europe where the English teams are turning around saying, well, we cannot compete with this, we don't want to play, they then shoot themselves in the foot and allow Real Madrid to run away and create a Super League. So I think there's lots and lots of complex layers of politics at play with this. And I do think we'll come out of it a hell of a lot better for it, with a lot more wiggle room and ability to nail down our big players, and then expand the contracts of others, and then add to our squad with quality. And again, I'll remind what I said the other night about people worrying about Bruno and Isak. They're two players who are worth way more than £50 million. And in the whole history of football, there's only 17 teams that bought players for £50 million or more. And most of them are crippled financially at the minute. So they're not going to be going to many places. There's not many places have that spending power, and we're one of them. And so if we can come out with this and work cleverly and make these rules work to our advantage, yes, we're going to be stronger for it. But I think we all need to just be a little bit patient while we understand how all the rules work and how the different systems are going to fit with each other to see just how much wiggle room we've got. I'm excited by it, but I'm trying to rein myself in a little bit.
That's the old Stockholm syndrome, isn't it?
It is a little bit, yeah.
It's like, it's good, but what's going to happen? Something has happened. It's bound to happen.
Yes, we're 4 points clear with 2 games to go and World War III starts. That would be the Newcastle situation, you know. That's that is the Stockholm syndrome kicking in. But it's also because we seem to have different voices from different places in football championing different ways to run this. And that, to me, starts to get messy. And there'll come a point where everybody's going to sit down and say, this needs to be ironed out one way or the other. And there are some things I could see immediately happening within the English game. But then when it comes to deal with UEFA, that's a different kettle of fish.
Okay, we did put a call out for questions. There's quite a lot to go through. We've got to get to the important ones first. James Wilson says, I've got a question. What is the name of the budgie, Mitch?
Feathers.
Feathers. There you are. That's a simple answer to a simple question. And one for you, Stu, from a namesake, Stu. He says, when you're at the jet wash, should the bonger go off halfway through the cycle or at the end?
I have no idea. It's been a long time since I've taken a car to jet wash.
Yeah,
in this part of the world, we have people who clean the cars for us. So
I know that's the one thing, asking people in the Middle East, what do you do when you wash your car? Yeah, I've got a little man that does it.
All right.
That's what happens in the complex you live. You pay someone and they'll clean your car 2 or 3 times a week. So
Edward Farms asked a great question, and spoiler alert, tomorrow's show, we embellished on this with a fans forum. So I used both of your questions, Edward, not just tonight on the professionals, but on both halves of the fans forum. So great questions. The first question, Mitch, I'll come to you first again. Do you think Isak will break Alan Shearer's goal scoring record?
Ooh. In terms of being at Newcastle?
Yeah.
No, because players don't stick around that length of time anymore. And that's not a criticism of Isak. That's just the way football is now. I think a lot of these records will now stand for a long time because of the change, the generational change between Shearers and Owens staying at one club for a long period of time and breaking records, to now when players do move on, players want a last hurrah to get a big contract somewhere else as they get older. If Isak was to stay around for the amount of seasons that Shearer did, yes, he could. He absolutely could. The lad's got everything, if you ask me now. And he's only gotten better in the time that I've seen him at Newcastle United. And I want him in a black and white shirt as long as possible. But he'll never stay for the length of time that you get players like Shearer staying. It just doesn't happen.
Would you agree, Stu?
Yes, I agree. And the answer would be no. Even if he did stay the same duration, bear in mind, look at the injury Shearer had, and we know that Isak's injury prone. I can't remember the top of my head how many goals he's scored for Newcastle at the time he's been here, but let's just say it's round about 40. That'll give him 220 to get, which is 20 a season for 11 seasons. Let's say that Isak's better than a 20 goal a season, which I think if he stays fit and gets the supply which he's getting currently, even if we put one to 30 goals, he would have to score 30 goals a season for 8 consecutive seasons to match Shearer. And I can't, as much as it'd be amazing if he did, because that would only lead to a more successful Newcastle United. I just can't see it happening. But let's not get away from what a quality player Isak is. I think he's sensational. He offers things that Shearer couldn't, yet Shearer could do things he couldn't. But we've all, as fans, been blessed to have these two leading the line for us.
Okay, the second part
Goal scorers, by the way, worth giving some due praise to Callum Wilson for joining Peter Beardsley on that list at the weekend. Bearing in mind how many games he's missed through injury, just imagine where he could be on that list as well.
And also makes the teams that he played in and started his career for Newcastle, Wilson. He was hardly playing at the top end of the Premier League, was he?
Exactly, aye.
But as I've said again, and you'll see this tomorrow night on the fans forum, but I really must remind people that the Premier League isn't the be all and end all. The real list is since the start of time, and Callum Wilson isn't even in the top 25. Les Ferdinand's not in the top 25 for goal scorers. So I know we all use the Premier League as a benchmark, but for me, if you're a great striker, then you break into that top 25 of Newcastle United's history. Peter Beardsley's in there. Peter Beardsley's sixth in that list. Alan Shearer, of course, is top. Jackie Milburn second. You've got Len White in there at third, and you've got Hughie Gallagher at fourth. You've got so many great names through the history. So there's a bit of perspective I put on it. I'm not being a party pooper by all means. Callum Wilson's been a good striker. It's a pity he's been injured so much, and he has played in some pretty poor teams. But yeah, I get where you're coming from, lads. The second question then from Edward Farms was, and Mitch, come to you first. Also, as Paul Dummett approaches 10 years since his debut, will we ever see a testimonial at the club again? Stephen Taylor and Shola both did 10 years, but never got a testimonial. Of course, the last benefit of the game we had was Steve Harper's.
Testimonials seem to be a thing of the past, simply because the way players were earning in the past, and now they don't need a testimonial to get the last big payday. In some respects, his contract extension was possibly Dummett's testimonial money, if you want to look at it that way. And I think he deserves recognition for being a good servant of the club. I think he's taken some unfair batterings over his time at the club. He was also quite harshly treated by Wales when he decided to take up the option of going to Wales internationally. I think he was very unfairly treated there, and probably regrets doing that even. But he's never intentionally let us down. He's always given everything he can, and deserves recognition for 10 years service, but it'll not be in the form of a testimonial.
Stu, have we seen the end of testimonials?
I can't do anything but agree with what Mitch has said there. The idea of a testimonial was for someone who'd done 10 years, showed 10 years like at one club, and it was to give them if not like a pension boost, wasn't it? Because the salaries that they were on, go and buy yourself a pub and try and see through the rest of your career on this like bonus. The players are far too well paid now, and I'm full agreement that although he's been a long servant and he's done a lot of time and he's done a lot of good for Newcastle, the last contract, even if it was 10 grand a week, is a £500,000 boost for him. So for me, I think testimonials should be the thing of the past unless someone's done above and beyond, like Shearer did, but then give the money to charity. And that's what it should be, because it would leave a bad taste in a lot of supporters' mouth, who some really, really have to watch the pennies to be able to get to go and watch these heroes of theirs. I think they would begrudge having to pay money again to give them more money on top. But if it was to go to a local charity or even a national charity, then yes, that makes sense. But for the sake of someone doing 10 years at a club, if he was 10 years in the first team consistently, I could understand. But I think from his point of view, how many people would turn up? And I don't mean that disparagingly or disrespectfully. You'd be lucky to get a 20,000 crowd if everyone thought every penny was going to Paul Dummett. Now, he went the same school as me, but different times together and that. So I'll be careful what I say, because he's a handy lad, is Paul, but he's got enough money. He doesn't need a testimonial from people who don't have the same financial status as he has. And I think he'd probably be the first to agree. He's been blessed. He's spent a full career at Newcastle through good times and a lot of bad times. But he's done it, and he's been paid very well for it, and he'll never have to work a day in his life if this is the final hurrah for him in the next few weeks. So absolutely no need to give him a testimonial.
Okay, we'll go to one of Stu's questions that he got on his X account. Martin Gribben, he says, why have we not seen training ground and training kit sponsors and the naming rights for St James's Park sold, Mitch?
It's a good question. I think you've got to have the right sponsors with the right level of money. I think our wings were clipped with the associated party sponsorship. I think that's made the owners very extra cautious in terms of getting the right people in. I think, as we touched on the Amigos the other day, they're definitely looking at upgrading existing partners because they don't need to be vetted again. And was it professionals?
I would say
Yeah,
Sunday after
professionals,
discussion on Saturday.
It all rolls into one sometimes. But certainly that's one way to do it. I don't think it's for the lack of trying and reaching out. What I've had suggested to me is we haven't necessarily had the right kind of fit of partners coming to us. And that's where I think the commercial department have got to do a lot better. That said, though, I know there's filming going on, there's all sorts going on with adverts for Saudi Air and for Adidas and stuff coming in the summer. So there's stuff happening. There's definitely stuff happening. And the timing of the announcement with the various FFP changes is probably critical in terms of when that money comes into the club and sits on the books.
Okay, what's your thoughts, Stu?
I'm sure. Well, I know we've covered it quite a lot, but everything's done very calculated and very carefully. For example, the Lewis Hall transfer, that won't go through until this financial year is finished. And if anyone says any different, because it was going to affect what we're doing this season, they would have just paid the money at the start of the year. So it was all done where it goes into next year's budget. But what we've covered on frequent occasions is that there is scope for so much more sponsorships, whether it be on the sleeve, whether it be on a training top, whether it be the training ground, whether it be a stand, whether it be the stadium. And these are like big sponsorships, not just we're associated with a tractor company and things like that. There is so much potential, but it's been thought out right, because since Newcastle United found themselves under new ownership, there's been a raft of changes to try and slow down our progress. What's happening now is, in their rush to stop Newcastle growing, a lot of the rules they brought in have stopped themselves growing, and they've ended up blocking themselves. So the fact that we've progressed so well on the pitch over the last 2 years, you'll see rules getting changed, because if the big boys can't get what they want because they change the rules because of nasty Newcastle, I'm sure there'll be influential whispers in people's ears to tweak them again. And we're sitting in the wings. They all know we've got more money than sense. So when it comes to announcing things, I think they'll be done very strategically. And as we mentioned on, let's get this right, last week's professionals, there's nothing wrong with upgrading existing sponsorships. Give them more exposure in return for more money. And Seller have been above and beyond from a front of shirt sponsor. Things have done. If you look at the first Champions League game with the light show that they did with the drones, with the thing that they're forsaken the front of shirt sponsor for one game for RNID, the fact that they're heavily involved with the stack. There's so many reasons that they could justify putting more money in because of what they're getting out of it. And the same can be said for some of the other main sponsors, but for sure there will be more sponsors added, but they'll be added at the right time. And what I know from the Saudi mentality is, business-wise, they will not shoot all the bullets in one. They'll always hold the big ones back for as and when when you've got your clearest shot, I suppose. You don't shoot at your enemy in the dark. You wait until they're right in front of you and they can't see you, and then you let it go. So they're watching all the rule changes, they're watching how other clubs are getting around it, and they think, well, if they can do that, you cannot stop us doing this. If they've done that, you can't stop us doing this. Oh, you did this to stop us? You've stopped yourself. And I think the general focus of trying to stop Newcastle has now slowed down. they're now realising they've got to start looking and thinking, how can we help ourselves? Because by stopping them, we're stopping us. So there will be changes, there will be sponsors added, but they'll do it rightly. And if it means, for example, getting a stadium sponsor for £20 million this season, or wait one more year and get it for 35, 40 million, they'll wait an extra year, especially if we're in Europe going into next season. Yeah. So everything, that side of the process, I've got no qualms with at all, and they have my trust implicitly. Business-wise, they know exactly what they're doing. Fan engagement-wise, different matter.
The Premier League are realising that they've created a cat's cradle, that everybody's getting caught up in now. And so they've got to do something about it. It has to be backed off. The other thing that always makes me and Stu laugh is when they talk about understanding what the value of a sponsorship is. They've got no idea. They've got no idea what a Middle East sponsor can gain from being associated with a top-flight Premier League team. And the best example is Noon, our shirt sleeve sponsor. They are their competitor in the region is Amazon. They are an Amazon-like company. They do all the same things, and they were behind Amazon by a significant way. And since they've been on our shirts, the deficit between Amazon and Noon has been reduced by 25%.
Wow!
So what's the worth of that to Noon? I'm telling you now, it's more than the $8 million they pay for the shirt sleeve sponsorship.
Of course it is. But also, Mitch, in this region is to be known as a business associate of PAF opens so many other doors.
Yes.
Because it gives so much credibility. They are the big dogs in the region by a considerable way. So if you can say we are linked with them, we are business partners with them, it gives you instant credibility, and then, as I said, opens other doors, brings other revenue streams in for that company. It's the knock-on effect it has, as Mitch has just quite rightly explained about Noon there. By being associated with PIF, or in this instance with Newcastle United, it curries a lot of favour. And this is what the Premier League, sitting in their ivory tower in London, cannot value. They can't gauge it, they can't estimate it. And if someone's willing to pay it, they're paying it because they see it as fair market value. But we're going to go down a different line here, and I know we've got loads of questions to go through.
Yeah, I mean, look, apologies to those of you who sent questions in, because we'll not get through all of these. I'm trying to be selective, and obviously Stu's opening gambit and Mitch's reply probably, answered quite a few of the ones that we've got with regards to, the anchor ship that had been discussed. The Court of Justice thing interested me. Mr.1234 on my shoe on Twitter said, any thoughts on the Court of Justice of the European Union press release, which came out today? FIFA rules on transfers may be contrary to EU law, Mitch.
It's a similar situation to Bosman. We've got a player who I think was at Lokomotiv Moscow and wanted to move on. He had a falling out with them. He claims his wages weren't being paid. They claimed he's breached his contract, and they've been in a position to stop him from joining, I think it was Charleroi in Belgium, because they were wanting compensation, and they weren't happy to release his registration. Meanwhile, the players counter-sued because I think he obviously wants his unpaid wages. And it sounds like it's a little bit messy. It sounds like it's a very specific situation. But this all has very Bosman-like feels. When that first started to happen, a lot of people dismissed it as a sort of, this is a one-off unusual case and it'll never have ramifications for wider football. Well, that's exactly how Bosman started. And then look at what happened after that. What the EU are saying is that there are certain things in the way that UEFA handle international transfers, particularly between countries, that may be in breach of human rights law and freedom of trade and freedom of movement. So I think there's more to come on that one. I think there's obviously appeals going in, and there'll be more rulings and clarifications of the judgment. I think as we stand today, the only thing that comes out is the summary of the judgment, which I've briefly read through. And as I say, it relates to one player and it's one situation, but this is where we were with Bosman. It was one player and it was a so-called unique situation. And then all of a sudden, the bottom fell out of the transfer market for players at the end of their contract. and the clubs had to deal with everything differently. So this may be a further change coming in the way that, because obviously for all the UK is out of the European Union, we have to abide by the laws attached to the federation in which we play. So it'll be inevitably linked to EU law. So I wait what the next stage of that is with interest. The player's not been named, but the two clubs have been named.
Yeah.
I don't even know if the player is currently playing at Charleroi or not, or whether that transfer has actually happened. Presumably not, because of the legal situation. These things, since Bosman, any little legal twist like that has potential to be another hole in the way that football works.
Yeah.
And here we are sitting, talking about being worried about, will the season end on sporting merit, or will relegation be decided in a courtroom? And there's another courtroom battle that might have implications in player transfers down the line. Well, we're talking about how you pay for players and how much clubs can pay and will pay for their wages and things like that. So it seems to be the way that football's gone since the money's got bigger. And that almost seems inevitable, really. But yes, it's an interesting case because, as I say, Bosman started as a one-off, or it'll never apply around the world. Things will never come of this situation. And oh boy, did it change football.
What's your take on this, Stu, before we go to the break? Anything to add?
Very quickly, so you've got time to ask another question if you want. But due to work commitments and writing War and Peace here, I can unashamedly say I know nothing about it. So I'll just take Mitch's word for what he said.
Okay, listen, we'll go for a break now. We've got quite a few questions to get through. We'll try and get through a few more after this. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Their website, mrvickies.co.uk, telephone 01768 210 102, or email info@mrvickies.co.uk. Thanks to United Group Travel. There are no strangers in our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. Their website, unitedgrouptravel.com, email beverly.ugtl@gmail.com, telephone 01670 632 460, or mobile 0791 666 4174. Thanks to Media Arts for the technical side of things. And you can also find us as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or other podcast providers. You can subscribe to the channel by hitting the subscribe button underneath this video. Hit the all notifications bell so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumb up to like the channel and click share to your social media. If you want to join the channel, then click join for as little as $1.99 a month. If you want to become a member, for a one-off £25 payment, email john@nufcmatters.com or go to membership at the website nufcmatters.com. If you've got a smartphone, hold your camera over the QR code and it'll take you straight there. We also help the food bank on this channel. Go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk to the matchday bucket and you can leave a virtual donation today. And don't forget the end of season 2, 20th of July. Tickets from nufcmatters.com and newcastlelegends.com. Supermat and Gibbo live on stage. Ask George live on stage. And the long stands as well. We're doing that in aid of Dementia Matters. It's going to be a cracker night. And the Rob Lee tickets are still available for the 2nd of August, which is a Friday night live at the City Hall. And you can get those tickets direct from ticketmaster.co.uk. And don't forget, if you want a bit of entertainment on a morning, 7 till 9, the North East Footy Brekkie is still going strong until the end of the season. Me, Rye and Ted do the honours. Well worth a listen. We have a lot of fun. I know a lot of people from NUFC Matters do jump on that and get involved as well. And well done to everybody at United Group Travel. I've been giving them a shout out this week. They've won the Travel and Tourism Award for 2024, and that is well deserved. So well done to Bev and all the staff down there. Great stuff. Great to hear a bit of success. Okay, back to the questions. And well, it's a bit like lucky dip, really, and deciding which ones to pick and trying to find something that's going to test the lads a little bit. So going for some hypotheticals here. And Stu, I'll come to you first, give you the option on this one. Where will Newcastle United be in 5 years' time? Stadium, training ground, sponsors, turnover. Get your crystal ball out.
The turnover, I believe, will double. I think training ground, they'll have a new one up near the airport. And stadium, I would, although today it was released, but not officially, let's not give anyone credit or discredit, that they're looking to expand St. James as it currently is. I still think the preferred option would be, I think that's been sent out to test the water, same as the ABC choice, where the vast majority chose option C, which was just to shift it up a bit and create a state-of-the-art stadium, something that we can be proud of, something that will reflect who our owners are, and something that will become synonymous with success, because that's where the team will be in 5 years' time, a successful team.
Okay, what's your thoughts, Mitch, on that?
Subtle. It sounds like a subtle expansion of St James's Park is going to be, to me, the first measure with the bigger game in mind. Training ground in 5 years, yeah, we'll probably be just moving into a brand new one, proper state of the art. Not sure where, but I think up near the airport seems to be the consensus that that's where it's going to go. In terms of on the pitch, we'll have more than broke a duck.
Yeah.
That won't be an empty trophy cabinet anymore in 5 years' time. And turnover, more than double. And we'll be in a position to expand income streams from the Middle East and Far East in ways that we don't quite understand yet.
Okay, simple answer to a simple question there. Yeah, that was good. That was good. Yeah, I like the way you shortened that down. That could have been one of those where you could have gone on for a while, lads. So we'll get through the rest of them like that. Then we'll probably get through quite a few of these. This is another one from Julie. If we sell Bruno, does that not send the wrong message out to other players? We should be building around him and not question PIF's ambitions. So, I mean, it's, again, hypothetical. I don't think we'll sell Bruno and I don't think we'll sell Isak. But, in a world where we did sell Bruno, for example, does that send out the wrong message?
Well, hypothetically, I agree with you, Steve. I don't think we will sell Bruno. And I agree with Julie's question. Of course, it would send out the wrong message. We touched on this on last week's Professionals, where it was said, the sell Bruno would, if you're a player that Newcastle then tried to court, you'd think, well, hang on, you've just sold. Sold, not sold. You just sold your best player, your most influential player. So why would I want to go there? I see Newcastle as an ambitious project. And if anything screams of lacking ambition, it's selling your best players. So I understand the hypothetical question, but genuinely, and again, I can't praise ownership enough. They're not stupid people, and far from it. And I think they'll understand the ramifications. And especially if you look how the ones with the boots on the ground, what I'm talking about, Amanda and Mirdad, how they report back to HQ. They have the emotion, they've got the fingers on the pulse, and they know full well the importance of retaining Bruno. And everything he says screams as, I am staying, just build a team. Just bring out extra players. Eddie Howe said something similar, didn't he? At the moment, we've got a very good player with a few additions, a very good team. With a few additions, we could become an excellent team. And that's him calling out, saying, to me, that was like saying, watch this space. we're going the right way, and everyone's singing off the same hymn sheets. And sometimes we can be overreactive. Well, not sometimes, a lot of times we can be overreactive as a fan base. But if you look from where we were to where we are in 2.5 years, follow that on in 2.5 years' time, and in another 2.5 years' time, and would be unrecognizable from anywhere in our history, apart from maybe a little spell in the 50s and the mid-20s when they won the leagues. So that's what's coming. That's what they want, because that gives global recognition. That brings in the sponsorships Mitch referred to in the previous question regarding the Middle East and the Far East. And we will become a global juggernaut when it comes to talking about football. We've got a bigger ceiling than what Manchester City have got, and they're recognised as the biggest club in the world at the moment. We have already starting off with a bigger fan base than what they started off with. So how big can we get? That's a rhetorical question, because there isn't an answer to it.
What's your thoughts on that one, Mitch?
No, Stu's absolutely right about one thing there. You build around your good players. And Julie's right, it doesn't send a great message out if you end up selling someone like Bruno. But we also have to understand, I think it would take something quite exceptional to take Bruno off our hands. And that's the way we would have to look at it. There's a situation that really would be quite exceptional. We have a spine: Pope, Botman, Bruno, Isak, consolidated with people like Gordon, Joe Linton, the two young fullbacks around them. That if we keep that and add to that and add quality into that mix, that's what we should be looking to do. And I think that's what all the moves we're making are aimed at. As we've all discussed at length, the actions of Bruno recently, particularly buying a brand new house for £4 million, does not seem to be the action, thank you, of somebody who is looking to move and is of the mindset to move. And I think that's important. That's a massive message. It's a message to us, way beyond kissing badges and holding flags in the air, that his mindset is he's not expecting to go anywhere either. Yes, his agent's a mischief maker, but a lot of agents are anyway. So I think I get that's the Stockholm Syndrome fear kicking in. I totally understand it's not a good look if we let somebody like Bruno go, especially now when we're on the up. But I'm still reasonably calm about it.
But Mitch, if we add on when I talked about the salaries as well, Bruno's happy with his new contract. He's signed it, and he was more than happy to sign it. And whether that's 150, 160 grand a week, and Tonali's the other side of it, say he's 140, and Joe Linton's round about that way. If you put Isak up in that category, you put Reyes, Botman and Gordon, not to that level, but they've got a core. As you mentioned, the spine. Every team that is ever successful has a strong spine. And you've got a strong spine there of young, super talented, hungry, ambitious players who
And
have
bought into the club. In that.
Yeah. And they've bought into the club. And then you've got the potential of someone like Livramento and possibly Anderson, already at the club. There's so much there that can take us to a level where salary-wise they're happy with it. And then you start adding players who want to be part of this project, and you're not paying £300+ grand a week for your Varans and your Casemiros and over like 200 grand a week for the Sanchos, Maguires. We're doing it the right way. And people are earning the contracts, and they're happy to receive them, and they're happy to stay. And that's where we've got a model that is proven to be successful. The only issue that we've got as fans is we want the success now, because we've been starved of it. But it is coming. All of this, we talk about the skyscraper or the building blocks or the jigsaw, all the pieces to me are on the table, and we can even add a few to make the jigsaw bigger and better. And that's where we're going. This is a long-term plan. They're not in it for 2 or 3 years and then let's jump out after they're making a profit. They want to be recognised as a global superpower. And I refer often to the interview in the documentary with the chairman. His finger was up, number one. number one. And he said that with so much belief, so much determination, so much focus. That's where we'll get to.
It's very clear.
Yeah.
Alan Hall, he's putting you on the spot with this one, but I think it's easy enough to do. You're both, well attuned with both teams. He says, what would be your combined 11 from this season's team and the high-scoring entertainers team? Stu might have an advantage because he's got a bit of paper. So do you want to go first, Stu, and give Mitch a chance to do it off the top of his head?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first, Stu. So
I
goalkeeper.
would have Pope in goal. I'd have Trippier right back. Beresford left back. Then I would have Botman and Albert in the back, the centre halves. Up front, it depends which form of entertainers, because for me, the original entertainers was the first season we got promoted. And it's going to be but you include Ferdinand, you include Shearer. You've got to have Shearer in the team anyway. You've got to have Beardsley in the team. You've got to have Isak in the team. So if we go a front three of Shearer down the middle, Isak on the left, Gordon on the right, which would then put Ginola as a sub. And then in midfield, you've got to have Bruno. You've got to have Beardsley somewhere. And to give it a bit more bait and a bit more stability, I would say Bobby Lee.
Okay. Mitch?
Wow.
I know.
What
difficult.
a tricky one.
It is difficult.
Pope in goal. I think I agree on the full-backs, Trippier and Beresford. Centre-backs for balance, I'd maybe have Peacock and Botman. And then if we're going to go with a 4-3-3, Lee, Bruno.
Beardsley.
No. Very tempted to. Lee, Bruno and Gordon in a withdrawn role. And then I would have to have Ginola in there on one side, Shearer up the middle and Isak on the other.
Hell of a ask. It's a hell of an ask, that really.
Imagine the bench you have, Steve.
I know.
Like Andy Cole, Ferdinand on the bench, Ginola on the bench. Yeah,
Yes,
man.
I'll chuck in. Who would you have as a manager then? Keegan or Eddie Howe?
Keegan.
Mitch?
In that formation, Eddie Howe. Because I don't think Keegan could play that.
That's why I picked Albert, because you just need Botman to sit at the back and maybe strip out the rest and just be going.
Great stuff. Great question, that. Kalan, thank you for your question. Do you think the USA pre-season caused the injury list compared to the season where we had a training camp and achieved Champions League? Interesting question. Mitch, do you want to go first on that one?
The whole injury situation is super complex. Was that pre-season trip part of the problem? I think if we sat down and had a proper root and branch review of it, maybe we had less control. We certainly did a hell of a lot of miles. But also give her a hell of a lot of exposure and a bit of cash, and it balanced the books a bit. So there's your inevitable conundrum. We seem to be looking that we're doing this post-season in Melbourne, and then pre-season Japan, which is even more miles and going the opposite way. So the club obviously don't see a problem with it. What I think we did lose, though, was a lot of very careful control over what the players were and weren't doing in terms of fitness, recovery, training, because we were squeezing these games in around a lot of travelling as well. But I think also some of the injuries we've been so unlucky with. I don't think any team will see this, not just the level of injuries, but the type of injuries, and that really odd mix. 3 dislocated shoulders, for God's sakes, that's just crackers. It's a lot more complicated than that. But could it have had a role? Yeah, I guess. Particularly if Eddie had different ideas and then all of a sudden was presented that at sort of shorter notice and then had to change his concepts about what he wanted to do pre-season.
Okay, what's your thoughts on that one then, Stu?
It depends, as Mitch said, if you did a root and branch study of it, then the two teams, there was 9 teams that went to America. It wasn't just Newcastle. You know, we didn't play local teams, we played Premier League teams, and there was different leagues within the leagues. And the 2 teams that have suffered from injuries most this season has been Newcastle and Brighton. Now, both of those qualified for Europe for the first time, and well, for us in a long time, Brighton the first time in their history, which brought on extra games. And then we had the injuries that, not just injuries just through wear and tear, we had injuries that were freak injuries. So that's had a knock-on effect. Then we had Tonali's suspension, but for me, and this is just my personal opinion, we haven't had it scientifically proven, and even if it was, it probably would never be released. I think the VAR and the players standing still for 2 or 3 minutes, and then the extra time, they're not playing 90 plus 2 minutes anymore. Most games are like 100 minutes plus. Yeah. These extra 10 minutes, and if Newcastle style of play, same as Brighton, it was explosive, it was counter-attacking, it was running at pace, playing with press. And by doing that, it's like the 100-meter sprinters. And then this stop-start, the muscles just start to contract, and then you expand them again. And sometimes if you expand them too quickly, Dr. Neil will be able to explain this a lot better than I am. To me, I think it risks more injury, or it puts people at more risk of injury, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think there's been a combination of things, not just one, but for me, especially through the winter months, when you've got players who rely on pace and quick acceleration, and they're standing still while everyone's looking at a screen waiting for a decision, then all of a sudden they've got to get going again. I would like to see the stats on how often the team that's meant to have conceded the goal and doesn't actually then goes on the offensive and gains an advantage. Because if you scored, you had the emotion, euphoria, and of scoring, and then it's taken away from you. So naturally you're down, and then I've got to run back there. I'm not going to be bothered. Where the other team have got the elation of getting off for one, and it takes them further forward. And this is why I'm saying this. I'm probably rambling now, but there's a few things put together that I think's created the injuries. It's not because they went to America. Newcastle have been to America before. Other teams go to America. Other teams go to other parts of the world, whether it be South Africa, whether it be the Far East. We've never had an injury list like this. Never. But there's a combination of things, but it's very simple to put it down to go to America. It's very simple to put it down to bad luck. It's very simple to point the finger at, maybe it's the style of boots that they're wearing, the too light weights, and they can't stick in the ground enough for the turns. That's why you're getting ligament injuries more than you used to. But I do think there's a combination of at least 5 or 6 things why not just Newcastle, but other teams have had more injuries this season. But to me, is at the top of the list.
If you were to push me on it, I think the 2 things that have had the most significant impact this season are lengthy VAR breaks, and then the resultant 7, 8, 9 minutes extra instead of 2 or 3. 10,
15 in some cases.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Stu, and I think that for me has been the biggest impact.
Definitely, I would agree as well, lads.
Tomorrow, Mitch, which will be next week.
John Richardson, great question. This follows on from what Sid was saying on Talk of the Tune on Tuesday. Should Newcastle United start a waiting list for season tickets in anticipation of future ground expansion? If so, what should the criteria be? First come, first served, a lottery, or some kind of pony system, or indeed a mixture of all 3 with allocations for each option? Discuss. Sid said the people who left under Ashley should be given first refusal. Mitch?
Disagree entirely. I was chair of the trust, and I was asked by many people to tell people to give their season tickets up, and I couldn't do it. And fair play to anybody who did. You're a bigger and better person than me in that respect. It's also become very clear to me from what I say on certain individuals' social media some of them who made the biggest mouth about I'm never going back and I'm not doing this, didn't actually get their season ticket up, and they're back in away ends this season and they're here, there and everywhere. And they're talking about who should and shouldn't be allowed back at St James's Park. I'm sorry. I'm disappointed with that. I'm disappointed with some individuals for that. The only thing that is fair in the situation that we have is first come, first serve. If you're going to do a waiting list, the club have shown they can't do ballots and lotteries very well. That seems to be a bit of a farce from without going on a ticketing rant. Should we have a waiting list? Maybe. That used to work in the past. And what was it in the past? It was first come, first served. And sadly, people can't be entitled and expect they just get straight back in. That seems to be a very modern trait for me. As somebody who, the situation I had was I actually had 2 tickets in my name by some sort of odd, typical box office cock-up, and I kept both going. And then when we all moved to be back together again, when we all went to the bar in 92, I gave one of the tickets up, and with that ticket went all my loyalty points. All of them. They'd put them credited to one account instead of split between the 2. And I had to build all my loyalty points up again, and I was given no favours, and I was given no help. I had to start from 0 and build it up again. And I can tell you that was a right real pain in the ass. But I did it, and I didn't complain about it. I just got on with it. And I think that there should be more of that, perhaps. It's a really difficult question. Steve Hasty and I have talked about ticketing and season tickets and all of these things for years and years and years, and we've come to the conclusion there is no right or wrong way to do it. There's no way that you will keep everybody happy. But what we need from the club, and what we haven't seen from the club, if they know what they want to do in a certain situation, will you just get on and do it? Tell me what we're doing, and damn the bloody torpedoes. You're going to get stick one way or the other, so just get on with it.
Can I keep everybody happy? Tickets, Stu, I mean, we don't want to go too much into it, but just, obviously when we pre-recorded this show, there'd been announcements that potentially it looks like Newcastle's feasibility study will produce an extension on the Gallagher. People talking about 8,000 extra on top, which would take Newcastle's capacity somewhere in the region of 60,000. Should there be a waiting list? Sid on Tuesday said he didn't think there would be season tickets. He had a feeling it would all be corporate.
I think it's absolutely right, Steve. I think you find out of that 8,000, maybe it's 2,000 are season tickets. The rest will be corporate. Yep.
So what's your thoughts, Stu? Is there a fair way of doing it?
Well, at the time we're recording, it's only a hypothetical released by one part of the journalists. So whether that means it will be 60,000, but let's go with that. There's many responses I can give, but no answers. No definitive answers anyway, because we don't know what the capacity will be. We don't know if it'll be 60,000 or 62 or 65. I think currently they're running at 29,000 season ticket holders. And whether we like it or not as a fan base, we have to accept for the club to grow, it will create more space for corporate. It has to. And the everyday fan won't get all 6,000 or all 10,000 extra tickets that become available. And another thing we have to accept, especially when we're from a very traditionally Labour part of the world, we are run by Tories like most football clubs, and cash is king. So ultimately, that has to be an acceptance. And the rule that they normally run by is put your money where your mouth is. So let's just say it creates an extra from 52 to 60,000 extra 8. Let's be accepting that. Bear in mind, you've got to take in a quota would have to go to away fans as well. So that was going to create at least an extra 500 spaces for away fans, because they have to do that. So let's be over generous to say it's 1,000. So that leaves 7,000. I think ideally what they'd like to do is have a Dortmund-style black and white wall for the Gallagher, if that's what they're going to expand, and create more revenue from newly created corporate areas in the Milburn stand, because people like yourself, Steve, the 10-year deals are up. And then there's going to be a hell on that you've doubled my season ticket price, not from you personally, but from others. Yeah, you're pricing us out. Well, then it'll be like, if you don't like it, lump it. We've got people who will take it. But I feel like what they'll do with that area is they'll keep a core of people on the season tickets. They will create more season tickets. They will try to appease the fans with perhaps a bigger standing area to keep the atmosphere going, bellowing out of an extended Gallagher, if that's the way they're going down. But there'll be more match-to-match tickets become available, but at a price that the average matchgoer won't be appreciative of. So that's the concern. But as you rightly said, you can't please everyone all the time. So what you have to do you gauge yourself as a true Newcastle supporter by forsaking going to the match for Newcastle to win trophies, or do you say, no, I'm going to the match and they never win anything? So for me, and I've said it clearly before, I think the solution is the 70,000 stadium on the moor, just up the road there, where the back end of the Leazes becomes the front end of the Gallagher, if that makes sense. And it just gets moved up a bit, which was option C in that video that got put out earlier in the month.
Yeah.
That, for me, is the way to go forward. But when it comes to put your money where your mouth is, first come, first served. They'll do a survey to everyone who's a member. It could create a better atmosphere because you've got people who can't sit together, who used to sit together, as Mitch just explained there, who want to sit together. But then you've also got people like, no, I've sat here for 30 years. I'm not moving. This is my seat. Me and my tartan rug have sat here for 30 years. I'll nail myself to this seat before I have to move for the greater good. You know, so you'll never please everyone. And what I said, possibly looking back controversially, I should have done the think before I tweet scenario. But when I first seen the plan, or the supposed plan, it looked like, from the view that was shown, it looked like the biggest bog seat in the world. And how many fans of opposing teams will have so much a laugh at our expense because of that? I'm sure we've got broad enough shoulders to get over it, but at the same time, I was disappointed if that is what is to come to fruition. I believe for me, it's, and I'll have to mention this, Luke Edwards, not going for clicks because he's got the information from somewhere, but I think, and again, not for the first time, he's probably been fed something to test the water. And he's not the only journalist that has succumbed to that, run with what they'll call an exclusive and then find out that doesn't really happen. But I'm sure he printed it not in his best interest, which of course he did, but in good faith and believed that the information he was given was correct. But if you've got like a U-bend shape stadium, it's going to look disjointed. It actually, to me, would make us look a laughing stock. And that's because of Leazes Terrace. We understand the reason behind it. But if you look at how the Galley, not just the Galley, St. James's is a huge concrete structure. You know, it'll probably cost too much to change that, just add a few thousand seats. So for me, if they're doing it, they're going to have to make the Gallagher the majority stand and saying, this is what we're doing. But you can overcome all those issues by creating a new ground. You're a season ticket holder. You get first choice. You can. There's the bowl. This is the prices. Choose where you want to sit, and you get enough notice to do that. Then people can say, I'm sitting next to him. We're going to sit there. Oh, that's too expensive. We'll sit there. Oh, by the way, at this side, the traditional Gallagher side is going to be, 10,000 standing, and we want singers in there. If you're prepared to sing, by all means, apply for your season ticket. After that, it'll go to members, not people who fought the great fight and give up the season tickets to help force Ashley out. You know, how far back do you go? You know, like my great uncle went to the first cup victory, so therefore my family's entitled to a ticket. You know, it doesn't work like that, and it is a money-orientated world. So, is it first come, first served? With season ticket holders? Absolutely. Then go to the members, put your money where your mouth is, and let's see what happens.
The point about giving tickets up and forcing Ashley out, it didn't. You just ended up giving them away.
Yeah, and look, somebody came in with a good offer, but you couldn't refuse. It's as simple as that, really. You know, Mike Ashley does what he does when he wants to do it. The fact that we're flush is probably the reason we've designed it like a toilet bowl. Jerry Sue, another good question. He says, we're a very good side, but we now need to go to the next level and become an excellent and, more importantly, consistent side. That's a comment from Eddie Howe. What are the professionals? What are the professionals read into this statement? I get the impression the club and the owners mean business this summer. Can you discuss this, lads?
Absolutely. It was probably the quote I said before the previous question, and I did quote Eddie Howe. I wasn't stealing it. It shows to me that they are focused. They do mean business, and it's not often they come out with like rally call sound bites like that. You know, he's very measured in how he responds to certain questions or when he makes statements as Eddie Howe. So for that, I think he's had assurances that the purse strings will be opened a bit, and he's not nicking a tenner from his granny's purse. You know, she's opening it up and saying, "Help yourself." But this is as much as is in it. Take what you need and get what you want. And this is why I've been consistently saying for months now, I believe we'll have a big gross spend on summer. But yes, of course, net spend might be brought down. But I genuinely believe we will spend over 200 million this summer. Whether we claw back 50, 60 million or not is another matter. But what he's saying there, he wants quality, not quantity now. He's got, if he adds the quality, as we've talked about before, the squad depth sinks, but the ones at the bottom are much better than the ones that were previously at the bottom. Now we're talking about sinks and bottoms after the toilet ground.
Yeah,
the toilet, but that's the bit I'm getting to. I think he's looking for 3 or 4 quality players who are capable of joining the first team, and then maybe adding a couple of youths.
Okay, Mitch, your thoughts?
Well, if you took the defensive consistency we had last year and add that to the attacking flair we've had this year, where would we be?
Yeah,
we'd be snapping at the heels of Man City at least, if not actually ahead. And so that's what he wants. So what we need to focus on is absolutely what Stu says is improving the depth of the squad, so that if we do get injuries or we can rotate, it doesn't hurt with the way it has this season. Because if we manage to get European football, given where we were sort of at the end of January, and we felt like we were on our knees and we were punch drunk and everything, the whole bottom had dropped out the season, I think that would be phenomenal. But if you'd added the defensive solidity, Nick Pope's something like still in the top 6 goalkeepers with clean sheets, and he's been missing for months. You know, and I think it's things like that. That's where the consistency comes in, and we can only get that consistency by improving the depth of the squad.
You know, Mitch, I'm just checking something here while I'm looking through. Where we are on the table, we're 14 points behind Aston Villa, right? And we're 4th and comfortably 4th at the moment. Now, considering the injuries we've had and the amount of bad luck we've had, a lot of teams get bad luck as well, but you take the 5 points we dropped to Luton, the 5 points we dropped to Bournemouth. Just those 2 teams alone, just those 2 teams.
Yes.
And we're right up there. We're above Tottenham, chasing the Champions League players with a depleted squad where we've had sometimes the 11 plus that have been injured are better than the starting 11, and we're still there.
Yeah.
So we're not that far away.
The defeat of Forest at home, 3-1.
Yeah. There's your 13 points, Steve. We're right up there.
Everton draw 1-1. You know, there's some really good cases there. You're right. Look, we've only got about 12 minutes left. There's another good question from NUFC Geordie. 2 questions from me. The vote yesterday, obviously this is pre-recorded, so it was a few days ago. What does it mean? We've discussed that a little bit. And why are Villa against it is an interesting part. Second question's about Everton. And again, the news which broke on Tuesday about the insolvency administration company they have brought in due 777. Does this mean they are going into administration? So, yeah, I mean, look, why are Villa against it? And what's the situation, do you think, with Everton? What are we going to see with Everton now, do you think?
I think Villa are against it because they're thinking short term. They're seeing their wings getting clipped with the potential of being in the Champions League next season. And in the current rules, they've got an ability to spend, and it actually clips their wings.
Right.
And I think they're playing a very short-term game with that. When it comes to Everton, I've been sort of nudging people about this all season. Everton's situation is super complex. It's far more complex than people genuinely realise. And that's because of Mashori and Usmanov's business connections around the world, and in particular in this region. You can pull USM off the side of the training ground, you can pull him out of Everton's boardroom, you can pull the obvious money out, but I don't care what anybody says, he is still involved in Everton Football Club, simply by implication.
He has to be.
Yeah, simply by implication about his and Mashori's businesses in this part of the world are so intertwined, you can't have Punch without Judy. And that, again, is what the Premier League are missing a little bit. Then we come to 777 partners. When you read from places like Forbes that they have concerns that the managing director has links to Colombian drug cartels, and that's where some of this money that they're lashing around is coming from, people should sit up and take notice. Forbes don't write articles like that without a lawyer looking over their shoulder saying, yes, you can print that. That managing director has been done for drug trafficking in the US on more than one occasion. Today, 277 partners owned airlines have just gone pop and had all of their planes repossessed and left passengers stranded all over Australia and Canada. 777 partners are a curious group. Isak Hayden came back from Standard Liège, his loan there. One of the reasons, his wages weren't being paid. And it's not the only 777 partners owned club that has got a history of that either. They are a very, very odd setup. The bid they've put in for Everton and why they're being allowed to give them ongoing capital is it's on the understanding that all of these loans will just be turned into equity as part of the buyout.
Right.
That's why when people say, why are they allowed to give them this? Because they'll have an amount agreed with the Premier League where you can give them loans up to this, because that will all be converted into equity when the club changes hands.
Yeah.
I found it unusual that the Premier League issued this letter that kind of hinted that, yes, we'll let this happen. But what they tagged on was a list of conditions. They've missed the dates for the first 3 conditions already. So for me, it ain't happening. And I think Mashori's realising that it isn't happening. And the only process that Everton might then have to go to is insolvency. Ironically, though, that might suit 777 partners, because if they get some money back out of that, and the money that went in was from an unusual source, shall we say, the money comes back from a very clean source, if you get what I'm hinting at there.
Yes.
And that's quite, that works for them. The question for me would be, do Everton get themselves to a point where they're more than 10 points clear of relegation and get to the last game of the season and then say, right, we're going to administration, take the 9 points and stay up? And that's maybe their only way out.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a situation, far more complex than people realise.
Stu, give us your view on this, because I've got one more question, and Guy's question. I've got to say, because Guy's question is it's a thread. We've got 4. It's got 4 parts.
Jesus.
Right. I'll be quick with the 2 questions, but first I need to ask Mitch an answer A, B, or C. And I've been curious for the whole podcast. Is that a 2-tone T-shirt you've got on? Is it a basque or is it a cushion in front of you?
It's a cushion in front of us, man.
God for that. Thank God for that.
God.
Right. So, I'll keep looking. I think, what is this?
Well, I think I can do something. I think I can do something. Hold on. Wait a minute. You should have just said, here we go. Oh, there we
It
go.
looks like a basket, doesn't it?
Yeah, I've got you now, mate. Okay,
I'm worried about you now.
I'll see you next week, sweetheart. Right, so anyway, back to Aston Villa. Yeah, of course, very briefly, it's short-sightedness, and they are looking at the fact that they're going to have extra money for the coming season and for next season with the European qualification. And let's just start a rumour just for being tongue-in-cheek. Perhaps they only agreed with Man City because it was part of the deal for Grealish. Anytime there's a Premier League vote, you have to go with us. Of course, that's not true. I was just being flippant. Right, then the second question regarding Everton. If I had £1 for every time Dr. Neil Mitchell and Mr. Stephen Hasty had mentioned or warned about what was happening with Everton this season alone, I could buy a new season ticket for you and me, Steve, at the new stadium. Yeah. So that's the easiest answers to those.
It is. When you call him Mr. Stephen Hasty, I think you're going to say Stephen Hawkins. So
if I said Mr. Stephen H, then you...
Yeah, true. Guy Georgeton, he's going to get the final question. And Guy, thank you for sending this essay. Tar, he says, here's my question. We look at FFP from a Newcastle perspective, stopping us getting to the big time. For the teams in the bottom half and those in the championship coming up, however, they have limited funds anyway. So FFP actually helps them by stopping the tier above from getting out of reach. If FFP is done away with, player prices and wages will go through the roof, supply and demand. More and more money would leave the game and go to players and agents. Those that have the money would leave the rest behind, and lower half clubs wouldn't get a look in. Promotion to the Premier League would be pointless as they go straight back down, and we might end up with a closed shop, fixed 20 teams or less, Premier League and possibly a breakaway Super League. The question, how do we create more competition without leaving teams stranded waiting for a rich owner? Mitch.
He's just described where football is right now.
You know what? As I was reading it out, that's exactly what I thought.
He's just described where football actually is right now, where some teams are frightened of getting promoted. Our dear neighbours, if they got into the playoffs, they would shit themselves if they got promoted.
They do every time in the playoffs. What are you talking about?
Because they'd go back down quicker than the season they came back down when they beat us in the playoffs in 1990. And I'm not doing that to take the piss out of them. That's reality.
They'd be financially crippled.
The gap is so big that some owners really would rather not get promoted because they've then got a burden that they've got to suffer. If you look at the situation with Gateshead, they've been denied promotion not because of a sporting reason, but I wonder where their owner's head would be at had they got that promotion through the playoffs. There'd be players expecting increasing contracts and pay rises. There'd be more expense. They're moving up to a bigger league with further to travel and further expenditure within the game, etc., etc., etc. Promotion at all levels of the game is not for some clubs. You've got clubs below the National League level now declining promotions, even if they win the league, because they look at the next league up and suddenly that travel bill is going to be astronomical. That was the problem that I believe Truro caused. Truro got taken over by a very interesting millionaire character who actually invested heavily in the club and got them, I think, was something ridiculous, like 5 promotions in 6 seasons. And then one of the leagues suddenly looked at the distances that some of their teams were travelling, and the teams were forfeiting away games to go to Truro. They just would rather not go there. And they had to restructure the league from a north and south, to an east and west setup to cope with that situation. It's almost the same now, Championship into the Premiership. It's the same handful of clubs bouncing yo-yo-wise between the two. You can predict. And thank God we're no longer in that mix. The relegation candidates at the start of the season. You can certainly say the 6 teams most likely to be at the bottom at the end of the season will be these. And then you look at the Championship, and yes, the Championship still remains a curious division where bottom can be top at any day of the week. But that's changing now. That's changing now significantly. And so is it fixable? It's very, very difficult. FFP certainly hasn't done any good for it. The old school idea that money trickles down hasn't been happening. The EFL are more useless than the Premier League, let's be honest about it. Their ownership and directness test is ridiculously simple to pass. I think Pol Pot could pass it. They are desperate to get as much money as they can from the higher echelons of the game, and therefore they let certain things go. That's why they've allowed the FA to bend the knee to the Premier League over the FA Cup and not support the FA. They've decided to support the Premier League. Why? They're desperate for any trickle-down money they can get their hands on.
Mitch, can I just throw in
the reality of the post-COVID world that we were talking about. And all that happened when the deal was signed was it kicked the can down the road. And here we are, we've caught up with the can again.
I was just going to say, when you mentioned the FA Cup there, I understand what happened, but what I can't get my head around, and I honestly think it's batshit crazy, that the FA Cup was traditionally the last game of the season. The league had finished, it was the week after. But now, for whatever reason, and I can't understand the reason for it, it's now the second last week of the season. No other Premier League games are played, and then have a full fixture list the week after. Why not swap them over? So the so-called tired superstars will, apart from 2 teams, would get the extra. It doesn't make sense to me. But I'm aware we'll get to the clock, so I'll get to the question.
Stu, it's the Premier League dog dry humping the FA dog in front of everybody else, pissing on their chips. That's what it is. It's a power play.
It is. Steve, can you just read the question wise again? Because I think I've got the answer on something that I wrote earlier, so I'll just read it again.
I've closed it now, mate. It was on Twitter, and I would have to find it.
I think it was about the clubs not being able to afford to go up and well, along those lines.
I mean, basically, it's saying it's not a fair market. To give you an abridged version, it's just saying that if FFP was taken away, then it would make the gap bigger. The rich would get richer, the poor would get poorer, and there's no ambition really for any teams like Leeds, Leicester, or Ipswich, for example, to come up because they would always be playing catch up. So what's the answer?
Right. Well, that's been happening already. Hence the term anchoring from the new rule is to slow it down. But when you have teams like Leicester who are now promoted, they're going to be dog points as soon as they get up. And then because of the fact that they were in the Championship, they can't spend as much as the other teams because they didn't have a Premier League. It's crazy. So I'll go back to finish with back to the start, if that makes sense, from my opening speech, which was point number 5, which reiterates everything that the question was asking and something I brought up. And I wrote, ultimately, at least half the clubs won't be close to being able to spend and sustain the allowable figure without borrowing huge sums, which puts them at risk of going bust. See Everton. Take the favoured 6 plus us, Villa and West Ham, who would be capable of borrowing the money and sustaining it and reaching the financial limits. It could genuinely create a 2-tier Premier League. And that's what I wrote this afternoon before you asked that question. And that's scary. It's scary. That's a Super League within the Premier League.
Yeah,
but
it
what
is.
can be done? They've got away with it for too long. And as I said, to finish that speech, they're acting now. They're closing the stable door after the horse has bolted, and this is the best they can come up with.
Yeah. That is the end of the show. What a great show. Some great questions, some fantastic answers. We apologise we're not live this week, but we will be live again next week. But thanks to Stu, thanks to Mitch, and look forward to seeing you guys soon. Take care.
Cheers everyone.